Our panel's dried now, as you can see, but there's still some residue from the tape that's on the panel here. Can you see that? So there's still some dried residue that's on the panel. We need to get that off. We also need to sand these panels pretty much to their final grit, because the next operation we're going to do is create grooves in the side panel stiles and rails to accept the panel. So it's got to be the thickness that it's going to be when it's finished, so that we have a nice tight fit. If we fit it to the raw panel now, then sanded the panel, it would be loose in its grooves. So we want to get this processed at this point. We don't have to worry about the back in terms of the residue, because we didn't put a seam on the back. The first thing I'm going to do is use my card scraper and scrape the panel down, particularly where the residue is. And again, I'm trying to, whatever I do to the panel, I want to do to the entire panel. I don't want to make it thinner on this side and fatter on this side, or thinner in the middle. So I'm going to use this, and I'm scraping in a little bit of an angle here across the grain. It's also a good thing to do this before you cut the panel down, because if I do roll the edges over a little bit, I'm going to be cutting this off and cutting it down to its final size later. We're not going to do the very final sanding until we've cut it down to size, because we might mar it a little bit when we're on the saw. But we're going to get it pretty much down to final, and then we can just do a little bit of sanding, finish sanding after that. Keep checking it in glancing light and make sure you've gotten the residue off, because that is something that can show up again later when we put finish on there if we're not careful. And that looks pretty good. So after we're done doing this, we're just going to take our sander again and start with 120 grit, and then do 150. And what we can do is at the very end, after we've cut it down, we can sand it with 180 to finish it off. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll be ready for the next operation. Okay, just finished sanding both of these panels, and it's really important to make sure whatever you do to one panel, you do to the other. Same amount of sanding, because we want the same thickness. I sanded the back just very minimally, just to kind of get any bumps off that was there, down to 100 grit, because this isn't going to be showing, so I don't care as much about it. On the front, I started with 100 and just stopped at 120. We'll do 150 as a final sanding after we cut it to size. Now, to make sure that I've got all the residue off, I looked in glancing light and kept looking until I saw that the residue was gone. One final check I can do to make sure that it's not going to show up when I put the finish on is get some lacquer thinner. Make sure it's lacquer thinner, not paint thinner or mineral spirits. And just put a little bit on a rag, and you can wipe it on the seam. And if there's a residue line, it would show up. See how quickly it evaporates? In a few minutes it'll be completely gone out of there, and it won't harm the finish later or anything. Some of the other things like mineral spirits and paint thinner tend to sink in and stay there for a longer period of time, and we don't like that. So, and this is a way you can see what any of your wood's going to look like when it gets a finish on it. The last thing we're going to do is go back out to this saw, and I'm going to clean up an edge here just to get the any dried glue and overhanging veneer off, so it doesn't interfere when it goes against the fence out there. The reason I want to take a little bit off of this edge, and both ends is because if during our sanding process, if we've rolled over the edge at all, it's going to be artificially thin at the edge. So I want to get that cut off so that when we go make our groove, we get a true fit as to what the actual size of the panel is on the interior. So we'll go out to the saw next and do that. I don't want to make these too narrow, so I'm going to be conservative, and I'm just going to take 1/8 of an inch off this side, move the fence, flip it around, and take 1/8 of an inch off the other side. So we just clean up the edges, but it's still big enough for what we need later. Guard on. Lower the blade a little bit. Move the fence by 1/8 of an inch. Turn around and cut the other edge off. Now we'll go to the panel saw and cut the 2 ends off. I've set the stop for a length that's longer than what I need later. And I'm just going to simply square off one end, flip it around, put it against the stop, and cut the other end.